Please like my videos, please subscribe to my channel, and please press the bell icon so that you get to know when my latest video has come. And to learn more and to find a video relevant to you, please do check out my videos list.
Hello, Namaskar and Adab to all my friends from your friend astrologer and guide Irfan, once more with you from your very own channel Astro Assurance. We have earlier done a video on the effects of retrograde planets in different houses, but that was a very generic video about how overall retrograde planets affect the results of houses and their manifestations. However, if we get more specific and look into how does a specific planet when it is retrograde act in different houses and how does it manifest its results, how does it affect the individual, and how does the individual face the challenges, these issues, and how can one prepare themselves. So now we know that Sun and Moon are the two planetary entities or the heavenly bodies which do not get retrograde, and Rahu and Ketu are always retrograde, and I have already made a video of Rahu in 12 houses and Ketu in the 12 houses, which you can look at for results for Rahu and Ketu. And because Rahu and Ketu don't go direct, so there's no point making a video on Rahu and Ketu going direct, which is the opposite motion to their natural motion. However, the rest of the 5 planets, which is the inner planets, which are Mercury and Venus, and then the Moon, and then the outer planets, which are Mars, Jupiter and Saturn. Out of these, Moon of course is not retrograde, but Venus and Mercury and Mars, Jupiter and Saturn can go retrograde. So out of these 5 planets, let's look at the results in different videos one by one. Today is the turn of the first planet, which is Mercury. Now Mercury is a planet which is closest to the Sun, and hence Mercury more often than not also goes retrograde, and hence every now and then we get to hear that Mercury has gone retrograde, and hence then we need to prepare ourselves for the retrograde motion of Mercury and how its results will act upon us during the retrogradation period. Now this is what we talk about in transit. However, if Mercury is retrograde at the time of our birth, and for different people it is retrograde in different houses, then what is the result that it can bring upon to individuals, to people? So let's look at if Mercury is retrograde in your horoscope in different houses in your natal chart, in your birth chart, then what kind of results does it give? Let's start with the first house first. The first house is your head, your thinking, your stature, your dignity, your approach to life, how you face different challenges in life, your general health, and how people see you, your personality, your character. So generally when you are looking at a planet which is retrograde, especially concerning analytical abilities which Mercury represents, then obviously because being in the Lagna itself, the results will also manifest very, very strongly. This is also because Mercury gets a lot of directional strength in the Lagna also. So a planet of analysis, thinking, completion, deep thinking, logical thinking, practicality, cleverness, intelligence going retrograde in the first house, which obviously means that all the results of the first house will be acted upon by the analytical ability and the other nature of and characteristics of Mercury, but in a retrograde fashion. Now what does retrograde mean? Now we know that retrogression generally means that the planet appears to go in reverse motion, but that is not the case. It is just that the relative motion of Mercury seems to be slower than compared to the motion of the Earth, so it seems to be slowing down. However, whenever Mercury is retrograde or any planet is retrograde, one thing is sure how it manifests, and that is it turns out to be a planet which cannot be trusted for certain results. It gives you very, very varied results and unexpected results. So if there is one thing that you can be sure of a retrograde planet, it is that it will give you unexpected results, or expected results from the natural direct motion will not come upon when a planet is retrograde. Same thing when Mercury is retrograde. So Mercury stands for analytical ability, so unexpected results in terms of how you can use your analytical ability. Mercury stands for intelligence, so unexpected results, how intelligence will be of use for you, of utility to you, and education. So intelligence, logical thinking, practical decision making, how you make decisions, because the Lagna is what is being affected here. Your health and overall demeanor and your stature and dignity and your personality in life all get affected, because here the analytical ability and the choice making ability of Mercury is unexpected, or a rogue result comes out, a rogue effect comes out, which means that you as a native whose Mercury is retrograde in the Lagna, you will face unexpected results in your communication. Misunderstandings can be the order of the day. Sometimes you are very, very clearly understood by people who are close to you, maybe your spouse, your friends, your business partners, your colleagues, and general society. And sometimes you will find that nobody seems to understand you. So you go through these bouts. Sometimes you feel that, okay, you know, very, very clear communication, people applaud you, people like you, people like your presentations, people like your choices, everything goes hunky-dory, and suddenly one fine day one decision goes wrong and the whole roof comes tumbling down. And that is how Mercury manifests. So many times Mercury retrograde in the Lagna means education goes well, education goes smoothly, and suddenly something happens because of which you either lose your year, or you get less results in a certain year, or you are not able to make the right choice for a certain degree or a certain educational stream, or you join that and then midway you want to change your decision and you want to go into different stream. So all these results, whether it is in business, whether it is in any choices that you have made, even critical choices that you have made, and which overall affect your own designation, your stature, your personality, and how people see you, all get affected, because Mercury is retrograde, the planet of intelligence, decision making, analytical ability is retrograde. So how people see you as a person who is intelligent, who is very clear of his or her choices, is very sharp, is perfectionist, is a person who completes things, all this gets affected. And this gets affected from phases to phases. So you will find some phases in life are very, very good, all your choices are right, education is right, your analytical ability is sharp, your decision making is sharp, the businesses that you are in seem to be doing very well, the presentation that you're doing to bosses, because Mercury is also the planet of communication, branding, marketing, everything seems to be hunky-dory, and suddenly you find that you go 2 steps backwards rather than 1 step forward, you go 2 steps backward, and then there is a big gap between where you were and where you are then, because of those poor choices you have made. You may lose a lot of money, you may lose even a job, or you may not be seen in your at work as the person who is dependable, and then you have to work harder to be able to overcome the results of a retrograde Mercury. And so retrograde Mercury in the Lagna will definitely overall affect your thinking ability. You will one fine day you will be very clear of your choices, and you will say, okay, this is what I want to do. But the very next day when you get up, you are still thinking, is this the right thing? Till last night I was clear, and then you may call, you know, your business director and say, no, hang on. I did tell you that we will do that yesterday, but I'm rethinking about it. Or the same thing happens in relationships. You seem to be very, very sure of a relationship day one. After a few weeks, after a few months, maybe a few years, suddenly you feel that this is not the decision for me. So this is the hunky-dory ups and down that Mercury plays a trick on you, plays a trick on your mindset, plays a trick on how practical or impractical your decisions are, how intelligent your decisions are, how education comes to your support, and overall how your choices are made. So if you have a retrograde Mercury in your Lagna, whenever you see that period is starting where you seem to be going backwards, immediately stop, take some time, see whether you have some wise counsel on whom you can depend on to be able to double check whether your decisions are right or not, rather than depend your own ability and to overthink, assuming that because I have thought from so many angles, my decision is right. So that phase may not be a long lasting phase. It may be as short as a few weeks to a few months, but sometimes if the retrograde Mercury is very, very strong in the Lagna, it may even be for a few years. So if it's the start of the retrograde period of Mercury, I'm not talking about retrograde in transit, I'm talking about results in your life suddenly seem to be taking a backseat, then wait for the good times to start before you make your choices on your own. Till then, be patient, play your cards well, double check your decisions, double check your communication, so that the retrograde planet doesn't affect your life, doesn't affect your stature, doesn't affect your dignity too much. Now, retrograde Mercury in the second house. The second house is the house of your dependents, the family that you're born in, your tribe, your community, your family values, your principles, those all habits that are dear to you, those values which are dear to you, food, language, all these are represented by the second house. But the more important things on a day-to-day basis is our livelihood, our earning potential, and how and what our savings are, the liquid money that we have in terms of either cash that we have in the bank or in our hands, or in a gold or any precious precious metals which you can immediately liquidate. So immediate liquidable assets that you have, hard cash or jewelry that you have, all are looked at from the second house. So the second house becomes critical because it is food, it is livelihood, it is savings, it is your earnings, it is also your principles and your values. And hence, if Mercury goes retrograde in the second house, your decision making about all these areas are affected, which means because Mercury is also the planet of analysis but also accounts, money, finance, and has gone retrograde in the second house, which means your ability to take wise decisions, thought through decisions, practical decisions in the manner of your job, your career, how you're making your money, how you're earning your livelihood, and making the right decision in the right manner, in the manner of your livelihood, your career, your job are very, very important, and they get affected, which means that sometimes your decisions seem to be very, very good or practical and very, very logical, and so they help you do well. So because it is retrograde, it is strong, and it is in the second house of money, connected to the accountancy or finance of Mercury. So when everything is hunky-dory, you get fantastic results with Mercury in the second house. You are very, very sure of where you need to put your money in, where to invest. You work in percentages. You are very, very sharp on where to invest, where not to invest, how to spend, where not to spend, and how to save. All those decisions seem to be right. But one fine day, because it is retrograde, it gives you unexpected results. It gives you results like a rogue planet. Suddenly, out of the blue, where nothing seems to have gone wrong, the dasha also seems to be right. Suddenly, the retrograde motion of Mercury and the decision making or the results of Mercury also seem to be going retrograde. And so you find suddenly that your decisions or your choices that you made for your earning, your livelihood, seem to take a backseat, or you feel you're doing something out of your values, of your principles, but people who seem to be liking you because you're a very principled person, value person, suddenly they may say, no, this is not what you should have done, you should have compromised, you should have been more tactful. And then you feel, excuse me, I mean, you are the guys who used to praise me for these very same values, that because I stick to my principles and values, and today you are turning your back on me. But this is what happens when Mercury gets retrograde in the second house. Even your dependents sometimes seem to go away from you, move away from you, or even point a finger at you for not making the right decision. And so whenever Mercury, strong Mercury, retrograde Mercury in the second house immediately starts to give you rogue decisions, unexpected decisions, it could be for a few months that your decisions seem to be going wrong, sometimes for years. And so many times one wrong decisions bases your career, bases your investments, bases relationships, can take you back many years, and you have to start afresh. And so it becomes a challenge where you thought you made the right decisions about who to be with, where to invest your money, which job to take, which job not to take, what values you need to showcase at work, and what values you need to present yourself in your job, in your career, in your livelihood. All of them seem to take a backseat. So retrograde planets will give you unexpected results. They will give you fantastic results for some time, and then suddenly it's two steps backwards, where for a few months or maybe even for a few years you seem to not get anything right. So if you're facing a retrograde Mercury in your second house, and suddenly out of the blue all decisions seem to be suddenly not going right for you, your investments don't seem to be right, your savings doesn't seem to be right, your livelihood doesn't seem to be right, your relationships with your immediate dependence on your family doesn't seem to be right, then take a back seat, be patient, see if you can depend on wise counsel to take decisions. If you're making a change in your job, or if you're looking at a new avenue for livelihood, depend on wise counsel to take your decision rather than jumping into decision making again, especially if you think you have hit a bad patch when nothing seems to be going wrong. So with the retrograde Mercury in the second house, patience is the virtue, patience is the key, discretion is the key, where livelihood, principles, values and your savings and earnings are concerned. Retrograde Mercury in the third house is a very, very powerful entity. Firstly, Mercury is in its natural third house, because the third sign is the sign of Gemini ruled by Mercury. So generally Mercury, if it's in direct motion, gives good results in the third house. However, retrograde Mercury in the third house definitely is not an easy thing to contend with, because here Mercury is strong, it gives you strong, good, effective communication ability. You are able to market yourself well, you are able to brand yourself well, you will be able to reach out to people, convince people. Short journeys will give you very good results. Your rapport with your immediate neighbors will be very, very good, and everything will be hunky-dory. Your self-enterprise, or if you are doing business on your own, the decision that you take for self-enterprise, not working for others but working for self, all will be able to hit the bullseye. However, because it is retrograde, suddenly, without knowledge, without warning, suddenly you will start getting as if you are hitting a roadblock, and decisions seem to not be going right for some time. It could be for a few weeks, for a few months, and even for a few years. So when things start to go downhill, they keep going downhill for some time, and it seems nothing that you do you can arrest that downslide. So your communication may be not hitting the mark, your presentations at work may not be hitting the mark. If you are doing business on your own, then they may not be hitting the mark. Especially if you are thinking of quitting your job, or quitting your working for somebody else and doing something on your own, and you have taken the decision at that moment when nothing seems to be going right, and so you feel that I need to quit my job and do something on my own, then it's not the right time for you to take that decision. You need to wait till you start to get slightly better results, which show that the retrograde Mercury results, which has got locked for some time, is redoing itself. It is like a restart of a machine. So when it is restarting, the direct motion results of Mercury are restarting. That's when you take critical results, especially related to the third house, especially when you're thinking of giving up your career or job, working for somebody else and doing something on your own. And because the third house is also the house of communication, your communication may not be taken in the right manner. It could be misunderstood. You may have said one thing in the email, something else may be construed, and you may be held accountable. So if you are getting in this regular email wars with people, or communication gap with people, communication gap with friends, family, with your romantic liaison, or with your spouse, especially if you have a retrograde Mercury in the third house, then it can create a lot of havoc in your life, because the third house is the house of being given a lot of self-enterprise, a lot of willpower is given to you, freedom of choice is given to you, and so if the planet which helps you making the choice that itself has gone retrograde, then a lot of your decisions can go wrong, and so you may get challenges suddenly with neighbors. Your short journeys may not give you good results, your communication may be off the mark, and your decisions may not be bearing you good fruits. Because this is also an Upachaya house, the third house, it could be a long time before the reversal of the retrograde results or manifestation of the Mercury starts. So if you have a third house retrograde Mercury in your birth chart, in your natal chart, be very, very careful when the time suddenly starts without warning, and suddenly everything seems to be downhill, nothing seems to be working. Patience is the key, depending on wise counsel is the key, but rechecking your communication again and again, rechecking your decision again and again, and not be in a hurry to take decision is the name of the game. Now Mercury retrograde in the fourth house. Fourth house is a house of your domestic happiness, your mental peace, all your physical assets, especially the large valued physical assets like house, land, your car, your jewelry, all your conveniences, your air conditioner, anything and everything that you have in your house of physical assets which you bought from money or which cost money, they all looked at from the 4th house. Plus the 4th house is also the house of your chest, your heart, your emotion, and that of mother also, and higher education also. So which means that any decision that you take in the manner of property or vehicles or related to investments, especially when you're purchasing things rather than investing, purchasing things where they can be of utility to you and they can be of value. You may think whether to sell your gold or not if at a later period, but at the moment that you buy them, you may be buying them to use for utility, whether it's cars, house, land, whatever. And there the decision can go wrong if you have a retrograde Mercury in the 4th house, because it is also the house of domestic happiness. Many times the decision that you take regarding your house, regarding your married life, regarding your domestic life can suddenly backfire on you. Things which were going hunky-dory till day before yesterday or till yesterday suddenly may turn around, and then suddenly you feel there is a downslide. One fine day there is a stop, and then the car starts to go in reverse, which means your domestic life seems to go in reverse, and from then on for weeks, months, sometimes years together, you face one challenge after the other if your Mercury which is retrograde in the 4th house, because your decisions don't seem to be right. You don't seem to be making intellectual decisions, which Mercury stands for. You don't seem to be making educated choices, practical choices, logical choices, weighed choices, looking the pros and cons of a decision, but everything that you do seems to be going wrong. Something which seemed to be practical, logical, worked out, practical, educated choice suddenly doesn't give you the results, and then you're left with your scratching your head. What went wrong? Your decisions regarding your relations can go wrong, because 4th house is the house of domestic relations, domestic happiness. So if you are going through the bad patch and during that time you commit to a relationship, then it can be a tricky affair, and the decision related to spouse, related to children, regarding purchase or selling of houses or conveniences should be avoided, especially if there is a downward slide, and things should be weighted upon things for the things to turn back, so that you start to get good results. A retrograde Mercury in the 4th house sometimes can give you very, very challenging results, sometimes throughout your life, because especially investments, large investments don't seem to give you good results, and the domestic life seems to be topsy-turvy and ups and down. Few months of your life seem to be great, like you're in heaven, and suddenly when the challenge starts for weeks or months together, for years together, you may hit a downward patch. So if you have a retrograde Mercury in your 4th house, be very, very careful how you deal with your domestic life, how you deal with your spouse and children, how you communicate with them so that you're not misunderstood. And if there is a downward slide, depend on your spouse for wise counsel, talk to your spouse more often, depend on your family to take your choices, to make your decisions, rather than go on your own, because then you may not be able to arrest the downward slide. So if your Mercury retrograde in the 4th house, it is a tricky affair to be dealt with a lot of patience, understanding and support from your loved ones. If you have a retrograde Mercury in the 5th house, this is also a very, very strong placement for Mercury. One of the reasons is because Mercury is the planet of money, accounts, finance, financial decisions, thought through logical decisions, and the 5th house is also the house of money, finance, accounts, speculative decisions, risky investments connected to finance and account, and also connected to upheavals in your career and job, because it is 8th house to the 10th house. And so if you have a retrograde Mercury in the 5th house, then it is important that you think through whenever you take any decision, because what happens with the retrograde Mercury in the 5th house is generally your speculative investments. When you make investments in shares, in mutual funds, or in property where you think that this is a good investment, this will give me good results later on, all of them seem to be hunky-dory on paper at the start, and it goes on smooth for a while, and suddenly one fine day you find that you have hit a roadblock, and all your investments suddenly seem to be making losses, suddenly seem to be hitting something like a dead wall, and everything starts to go in reverse. Because the 5th house is also the house of romance, so your romantic relation seems to be going well, everything seems to be going well, and suddenly some other misunderstanding happens. And because of the misunderstanding which is happening, miscommunication which is happening, the relationship also goes through ups and downs, goes through a roller coaster ride, and few days seem to be very, very good, few weeks, months seem to be very, very good, and suddenly something happens, and then a downward slide in the relationship happens. If you are not able to arrest the slide, then the slide can be so much that eventually even the relationship can break. So one has to be very careful with retrograde Mercury in the 5th house. This is also because the 5th house is also the house of children and your education up till your school. So one has to be careful how you deal with children, how you deal with their matters, how you deal with the important decisions at least regarding your children, because if you don't take the right decisions about your children, or the decisions are taken when Mercury's retrogression is in power, and that there is an arrest in how Mercury is giving you good results, and that time you take good decisions regarding children, then the decision may go wrong. Many a couple who plan to have a family or start a family, when Mercury is retrograde results or backward motion results were manifesting in their lives, and they took those decisions, they found that childbirth became a big problem for them, and many times the children also did not come out as children who will be obedient, who will be responsible, and who will be closer to the family. So with the retrograde Mercury in the 5th house, be very, very clear and sure of your investments, decisions regarding children, decisions regarding your education, and decisions regarding who you fall in love with and what relations to take forward and what not to. Especially when everything is going fair and suddenly you hit a roadblock, be very, very sure what decisions you take from then on till Mercury starts to give you good results, because one wrong decision at that point of time, the decision regarding children or romance or investments can backfire, and this can lead to big losses. A retrograde Mercury in the 6th house is really actually an enigma. The reason being is, firstly, Mercury rules the natural 6th house, which is Virgo, and Mercury gets exalted in the sign of Virgo. So Mercury, when it goes into the 6th house, even in an inimical sign, generally it's a very, very powerful placement, and if Mercury goes in a retrograde motion in the 6th house, then it becomes even stronger. But what happens is, Mercury can give you very, very strong results for a certain period of your life, and then disastrous results for some period of your life, or either for a few weeks or months, sometimes for years together. One after the other disastrous results come upon you. So sometimes brilliant 2-3 brilliant years, good years, satisfactory years, happy years, and suddenly 1, 2, 3, 4 years or maybe longer, where you feel that you're going backwards, everything is falling down, everything is tumbling over, nothing seems to be making sense. And that is a very, very strong retrograde Mercury in the 6th house. And if Mercury gets into an inimical sign, then the results can be even more challenging. The reason being is because the 6th house is the Dusthana. 6th house is the house of illness, 6th house is the house of sickness. So many times the decision that you take, which doctor to go to, which medicine to take, what kind of treatment that you need to take, or how to handle your colleagues at work, how to handle competition at work, how to handle those people who are clearly inimical to you, whether in your personal life or at work, all those decisions or your choices seem to go wrong, and hence you seem to be hitting a roadblock here, because the 6th house is also the 12th house to the 7th house, and it is the loss of relationships house, and hence many a times the wrong decisions that you take in matter of when the couple is not seeing eye to eye, the couple thinks that this couple of mine, this spouse of mine is an enemy to me, and then your choices become accordingly. You keep your distance, you keep going that distance, and one fine day you want to separate or you want to go their own way. And so if you have a retrograde Mercury, it will give you fantastic results for some time, but it will give you bad patches also in your relationship for some time. So you need to hold on to your relationship when you hit those bad patches. You need to hold on to your career, you need to hold on to your job when you hit those bad patches of Mercury, when your decisions don't seem to be going right. Otherwise you will find that relationships could go for a toss, not just going downhill, but going to a court case, and eventually going through a legal separation, not just a mental or a emotional separation or emotional distance that is created. Here it's a legal separation, it is a legal divorce which can also happen. So one has to be very, very clear and very, very careful with retrograde Mercury in the 6th house, because it is connected to your relationship, career, inimical sign from or inimical forces acting behind your back, dealing with people who are working below you, and health, and related to your sicknesses and illnesses. So decisions that you take are very, very critical how you take them. So whenever you see that while decisions are going good, very fine, however when decisions suddenly seem to be going downhill, slow down, put a stop to your decision making, depend on some friend or a wise counsel to take your decision, take a back seat, allow the time to pass, because then the Dusthana results are kicking in and kicking in very, very strongly. So if you are not careful, you may create more inimical forces at work, more enemies at work, stronger and more disastrous results in your relationship, and unnecessary legal cases or court cases can be upon you. So that could eventually lead to losses in finance, because Mercury is related to money, related to finance, and related to intelligence choice making. So if the choices itself are not right, then there can be losses all around. If you have a retrograde Mercury in the 7th house, now the 7th house is the house of relationship, partnership, the ability to work with other people, and it is also the house of Grihasthana, and a life where you are connecting to anyone and everyone who you are connecting on a day-to-day basis, a life of dealing with them, communicating with them, making choices about them or with them. So this is not about general society, it is about those people who you meet on a day-to-day basis, work on a day-to-day basis, whether they are clients, whether it's your spouse, whether they are teammates. And because these are the people who are the most common people in your life, or the people who have the most strong presence in your life, your decision making about the 7th house and the people who represent the 7th house cannot go wrong, because these are the people who you face to or run into on a day-to-day basis. Your spouse is very, very important, your colleagues are very, very important, those people you meet on a day-to-day basis, whether it is the person who picks you and drops you, or the friend that you connect with on a day-to-day basis, or the client that you work on a day-to-day basis or connect with on a day-to-day basis, all these are important. So with a retrograde Mercury in the 7th house, it could give you very, very good results where your choices are right, where whatever you are trying to convey is being understood well, is being understood right, and you have a very, very strong bond. But when suddenly the challenging results of the retrograde Mercury starts to kick in, and this is not definite basis only the transit, retrograde planet can suddenly without warning start to give you challenging results, can take you into a slide, downward slide. So here your relationships could be going down, your communication could be going down, you may not find the partnership very, very strong, you start doubting the relationship, you start doubting the partnership, you start doubting the people who work below you, you start doubting the client or anybody and everybody who you deal on a day-to-day basis. So this is a really challenging placement for retrograde Mercury, because it gives you unnecessary analytical ability, more sharp ability than is required about the 7th house. The 7th house is more about trust, about partnerships, about an equal equation. But here, because the person sometimes becomes over analytical, then the person thinks, am I getting enough from the relationship? Am I being served right or not? Am I being served enough or not? And so because of this over analysis, many times the person may spoil the relationship also. And so one has to be very, very careful if one has a retrograde Mercury in the 7th house, because while the good time is on, everything seems to be falling in place, your decisions are right, everything is right. But when the retrograde motion starts, you start doubting, is this the right person I'm married? Is this the right company I'm working with? Is this the right team member I'm working with? And so the downward slide can really pull down your business, your partnership, people that you work on a day-to-day basis, and everything could crumble. So be very, very careful with Mercury retrograde in the 7th house, because relationship could get affected, partnerships could get affected, your ability to deal with people on a day-to-day basis could get affected. So when the things are right, very well and good, but when things seem to be going downhill, take a back seat, be patient, take a deep breath and relook at the choices, relook at the relationship, do a lot of self-talk. The relationships are important for you. This is the passing phase. The bad time will pass. The slide, downward slide, will also get halted, and again the direct motion will kick in. So if you bid that time out while the retrograde motion is giving you rogue, sudden manifestations, and you pass that time, you bid your time, and then when you overcome those challenges, better time and much better time than before can also start. So with the retrograde Mercury in the 7th house, patience is the name of the game, and relationships are the key to getting back on track. With the retrograde Mercury in the 8th house, this is about how you make choices when you hit roadblocks, obstacles, tribulations and challenges and issues, sudden challenges which you did not foresee earlier. So these sudden events which come upon you, or even mysterious things or not so clearly understood things which come upon your life, and for mysterious reasons, you will find that many a times with the retrograde Mercury, the choices that you make, the decision that you make when sudden problems come upon you are not very strong, and sometimes they leave a lot to be desired also, because the 8th house is also a house which is the Dusthana house, and this is also Maraka house, strong Maraka house, and will give you obstacles, will give you challenges and sudden issues, sudden challenges. So your decision making has to be very sharp. Your ability to make intelligent decision has to be always on top of your game. However, you will find that generally you will get good results in life with Mercury retrograde in the 8th house. However, when the downward slide starts, the downward slide can be very strong. It can be very pathetic. It can be even destructive, because Mercury doesn't do very well in the 8th house, especially if it's conjoined with any other malefic, or even with the sun, or on the aspect of any other malefic. Then extreme results can also come with a Mercury retrograde in the 8th house. As it is, Mercury doesn't do too well in the 8th house, and if on top of it, if it's retrograde, then you will find that when the downward slide comes, or when the decision don't seem to be right, communication gaps seem to be coming in, sudden fire accidents or issues or losses or sudden notices from the government, anything and every problem that you can think of can come in, because they are all mysterious, because they are all uncalled for, they are all not thought of before. And even when everything seems to be hunky-dory, suddenly the whole world seems to be collapsing on your head when you have Mercury retrograde in the 8th house, because 8th house is a very strong Dusthana, and many times because 8th house is also the house of mysterious events, and Mercury also rules the natural 6th house, so certain diseases which suddenly come upon up and then become chronic can also come upon you. And so your health seems to be right, but for some time everything seems to be going right, and suddenly there is a downward slide, and then you don't seem to be able to arrest that downward slide in your health, downward slide in your choices, downward slide in your investments also. They also can go wrong, and because of which you may invite audits, you may invite notices for taxation, you may also lose money in insurance or insurance related investments. So one has to be very careful when your Mercury retrograde in the 8th house, because when the wrong choices come, more obstacles, more upheavals, more losses can come by to you. So if you have retrograde Mercury in the 8th house, be very sure and be very careful to depend more on your Jupiter, more depend on wisdom and wise counsel, rather than thinking that I am very sharp in decision making. And protect your money more, protect your investments more. Don't go for sudden investments or not thought through investments, and not without doing proper paperwork, because more losses can come upon you. This can affect your health, this can affect your motivation, this can also affect your overall status in society and overall how people see you. So be very careful with the retrograde Mercury in the 8th house. A retrograde Mercury in the 9th house can be a boon as well as a disaster. It can be a great boon because Mercury is the planet of education, of intellect, of intelligence, of very high intelligence, and a retrograde Mercury is very strong. The 9th house is the house of higher education. So if Mercury is strong in the 9th house, then it can really take you to places. It can give you great education, it can help you overcome competition, get into great universities, get into those faculties, those streams of education which you want to do, and everything can go very right for you. You may get admission into institutions of your choices also, and of that stream of education which you want to pursue. However, if Mercury retrograde suddenly starts giving you challenging results, which it will always give you, a retrograde planet will take one step forward and two steps backwards. So when the backward motion of Mercury starts, and this is not about the transits I'm talking about, suddenly without warning Mercury starts to give you challenging results, then the downward slide seems to be happening. So you find that one fine day, while everything seemed to be good till yesterday, one fine day and then the downward slide starts from there. You don't seem to be understanding things right, you don't seem to be getting good grades, you don't seem to be getting hitting off with the teachers, with the gurus, with the professors, relationships seem to be dipping with the father or with your gurus, or your ability to deal with people from different cultures and different areas of life or different parts of the country all seem to be going downhill. This is also because you are not seeming to be taking the right choices, not only about education but also about how you deal with people. And this is more connected to people who are connected to your education and connected to your fate and luck, because the ninth house is the house of fate and luck. It opens the doors of fate and luck for you. So if there are any strong authority figure, people who can open the doors of fate and luck for you, you will find that your communication with them seems to not be going right. Your decision making connecting with them doesn't seem to be going right. Your decision what to do and what not to do, which stream to join, what stream not to join, which higher education qualification to take or not, all seem to be running suddenly aground. So if you are doing very well in life and suddenly hit a bad patch where things don't seem to be going right, then be careful, especially related to fate and luck, because your fate and luck is governed by the ninth house. One wrong decision and the fate and luck will seem as if it's locked and you're just not making progress and you're going downhill from then on. So one has to be very, very careful. So in long distance travel, long distance communication, ability to deal with people from different cultures, working with guru, dealing with father, and not closing the doors of fate and luck upon yourself is what the ninth house represents. So be careful of what long-term decisions you take, especially long-term decisions, what long distance travel you take. If you are thinking of going to foreign lands to do to take a university degree or qualification, or to work there, be doubly sure which country you want to go, what stream of education you want to join, and whether education is helping you to open the doors of fate and luck for you. Because many times with the retrograde Mercury in the ninth house, you may do education in a certain stream, however you will find that you end up doing something else in career which is not connected to your education. So if you have a retrograde Mercury in the ninth house, use it wisely. Use it to improve your relation with your guru, improve your relationship with your father and dealing with other people, and to improve how you will open up the doors of fate and luck for yourself rather than close them. If you have a retrograde Mercury in the 10th house, then your Mercury can give you very, very sharp abilities how you deal with people at your work and how you deal with your supervisors, managers and authority figures, because the 10th house is represented by authority figures, important people like your bosses, higher senior people in your career, in your job, in your workplace. And because Mercury is strong in the 10th house, especially if it's retrograde, then it can give you very, very good ability to take right decisions, smart decisions, practical decisions, thought through decisions, educated decisions, very, very logical decisions in certain situations. And your career decisions can go right, your ability to deal with clients can be very, very right, how you deal with your bosses, your supervisors can be sharp, can be clever, can be intellectual. However, because you have a retrograde Mercury in the 10th house in your natal chart, I am not talking about Mercury in transit in retrograde motion, I am talking about Mercury in the 10th house in your natal chart being retrograde, then you will find that everything seems to be hunky-dory for some time and suddenly your career or job seems to be coming down. Your communication suddenly seems to be hitting a roadblock with managers and supervisors, misrepresentation, your data not being right, your presentation not hitting the mark, you saying something else coming out, your team members not trusting you, your bosses starting not to trust you, not to appreciate you, not to acknowledge you. So if there is a long period, lull period where bosses are not giving you appreciation, not giving you growth, not promoting you, not pushing your case, or the relationship not going well, then check if you have a Mercury retrograde in the 10th house or Mercury is transiting in a retrograde motion over your 10th house. In both the situation, there could be a downward slide, because the 10th house is also the house of your role at your work, your designation at your work, and your Kriyaman Karma. And so this is critical that your Kriyaman Karma or day-to-day activities bear good fruit for you, are intelligence, logical, thought through decisions and practical, weighing the pros and cons rather than taking the decisions in a jiffy. So generally when you hit a Mercury retrograde bad patch, the bad patch can sometimes be for years. Career stagnates, no decision is taken in your favor, you don't get promotion, sometimes in fact your role seems to be going or being shortchanged, appreciation doesn't seem to be coming to you, gratitude doesn't seem to be coming to you. So if you have a retrograde Mercury in your 10th house in your natal chart, be very clear what choices that you make, especially concerning career, especially who to work with, who not to work with, and how to work with. If you don't have a choice of who to work with, be very clear in your communication, double check your communication, double check spellings, double check meaning of every word, because wrong communication can end up you not being able to send the right message, you're not being appreciated, you're not being acknowledged. So if you're hitting a bad patch where you're going down a slide after everything seems to be going right, then you may have hit the bad patch which retrograde Mercury in the 10th house will throw at you every now and then. Then patience is the key. Work harder to have good relationship with your bosses, lie low, do your work with dedication and wait for the good period to click in more, because when you're able to overcome that bad patch, then stronger and better results are given to you with Mercury retrograde in the 10th house. It could be a turnaround period for you in your career or a downfall period for you in your career. This is how you work, what kind of decisions you take, what kind of logical thinking that you create, how intellectual decisions you take, and be in the good books of supervisors and managers, so that the strong retrograde Mercury can do more good for you rather than do more harm. If you have a retrograde Mercury in the 11th house, now the 11th house is the house of social connections, your friends, general society at large, working in large organization, and it is also the house of having wishes and desires. It is an Upacha house, mind you, but it is also Kama Bhava, a house of desires. So a lot of your desires and wishes can come good if you have a strong 11th house. If you have a strong Mercury in the 11th house, then your decisions of how to deal with society, how to deal with friends, how to work with higher ups in the large organization, how to get ahead in the large organization, cutting through all the red tape. And in the large organization sometimes you can get lost, but to make your mark, that sharpness, that tact, that intelligence, that power of choice, the logical practical decisions all come to your fore, all come to your help when you have a strong retrograde Mercury in the 11th house. However, retrograde Mercury by nature can give you rogue results, which means unexpected results. One fine day you find everything going right and suddenly you hit a roadblock, and those societal connections, those friendships, those client networks that you have developed suddenly seem to be going downhill. A client who was very close to you, working very well with you, even being ready to deal with you, even in tough times, suddenly seem to be going against you, and then you don't know what hit you. Your decisions don't seem to be right, your societal connections don't seem to be right, friendships are broken, and especially the large organization, you may be relegated to the back, to the back benches, or relegated to the back, where growth is not coming to you, movement forward is not coming to you, and your wishes and desires don't seem to be coming true. If you have 10 wishes that so and so thing should happen, even one may take a lot of time, forget all 10 coming true. But then suddenly 3-4 things come good for you, and then again there is a bad patch where you don't seem to be getting what you really wish and desire. So if you have a retrograde Mercury in the 11th house, because the 11th house is an Upacha house, works over a period of time and gets you gains, and it is also the second house to the 10th house. So earnings from your career related decisions, working a large organization and working for the society in large, or using societal connections to get ahead, all these can be impacted. So if you have a retrograde Mercury in the 11th house and you suddenly hit a bad patch where everything seemed to be going right till yesterday, and suddenly hit a bad patch where you seem to be going downhill, then immediately stop, take a back seat, rekindle those connections, rework on your social connections, rework on your friendship. Otherwise these can let you down. You may not be able to get the support of your societal connection, your friends and your social network, and you may not be able to contribute much also when that bad patch comes. So when you are hitting a bad patch where the downward slide seems to have started, when you have retrograde Mercury in the 11th house, take a back seat, be patient, rekindle your relation strongly, rework on your friendship, rework on your client relationship, rework on your network relationship, and depend on a wise counsel how to deal with them. Because if your messaging is not right, if your communication is not right, especially in a very important position in a large organization, then you could do more harm for yourself rather than do good. And because the 11th house is also the 12th house to the 12th house, if you're working in an MNC, then the losses of the MNCs or losses working in the 12th house or working in foreign lands can all come to you with more waste and excess than you desired. So be a little careful if you have retrograde Mercury in the 12th house of how you use societal connections, how you use your friendship, what period to push ahead, what period to lie low, and to be sure that the good period starts before you restart working on your social relationship, when you restart trying to manifest your wishes and your desires. If you have a retrograde Mercury in the 12th house, now this is one of the most trickiest positions for Mercury. The reason being is, firstly, where does Mercury get debilitated in? Mercury gets debilitated in the sign of Pisces, which is represented by the 12th house. So in general, Mercury loses a lot of its strength in the 12th house. And because the 12th house is also the house of imagination and living in a more imaginary world, Mercury is the planet of analysis. It is a planet of data, using hardcore numbers and data and making logical decisions, thought through decisions, weighed decisions, looking at the pros and cons of different things. 12th house being the house of imagination, of spirituality, of the higher realm, here Mercury doesn't do very well in terms of how it can support strong analytical ability, strong decision making. On top of that, if Mercury is retrograde in your natal chart in the 12th house, then it can so happen that your decisions can put you into more trouble rather than be able to come out of it. Because the 12th house is the house of solitary work, being alone, being in foreign lands or being in hospitals or with armed forces or with constabulary, then more often than not you've hit the negative part here rather than positive part. Rather than going to foreign lands and doing very well there, you may go to foreign lands but not do good, or you may work for MNCs, multinational companies, and still not be able to get going well or going fast where others seem to be pushing ahead of you, or high expenses coming to you because you don't have the right analytical ability to know where to what to purchase, where to spend and where not to, where to invest and where to save. So these challenges may come upon you, and it is also that the power of imagination and practical decision making seems to have been lost. When you have retrograde Mercury in the 12th house, a lot of your decisions seem to be going through waste and excess. So more hard work and less gains, more effort in your relationship, less getting the fruits of your labor or getting the same emotions back from your loved ones. Working harder in an MNC but not getting that appreciation or the gratitude to be able to get ahead. And so sometimes this can give you some good results in patches, some good results for a year or two, and then you hit a roadblock and then the downward slide also. Then you have to work harder to come up to the same level as earlier because you have gone too far below, and then much more work to get ahead. So it's a tricky position with Mercury in the 12th house, especially if it's retrograde. It can give you all unpracticality or impracticality rather than being practical. Wrong decisions can come about, wrong communications can come about, ending up with losses, ending up with waste and excess, ending up with wrong legal troubles, ending up even in hospitals and clinics, because your health may also get affected. So if you have a retrograde Mercury in the 12th house, be very calm, practical, take your time to take a decision, don't be hurried into decision making. Try not to be too creative or too imaginative or too over ambitious in your decision making. Keep your targets low, take one step at a time, because otherwise a retrograde Mercury, especially in the 12th house, can take you one step backward, 3 steps, one step forward and 3 steps backwards. So with the retrograde Mercury in the 12th house, patience, being careful, being more practical, being more careful is the name of the game. So friends, now that we have seen how a retrograde Mercury will behave in the 12 houses in the horoscope, check if you have a retrograde Mercury, or if you have any member of the family or your spouse or your children or your loved ones or more important people in your life, if they have a retrograde Mercury, because their decision making could also end up affecting your relationship with them and your equation with them. So friends, like this video, share this video, and if you're looking for a personal consultation for me, please reach out to me, the link given below. Till some other time with some other video, this is your friend astrologer and guide Irfan signing off. Ciao.